Your town, your station, your voice. Afternoons on Calon FM. Listen online at calon.fm.
It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show.
So next Saturday, the 17th of September, the Irlam Live team are staging their second festival of 2022. And this time over at the Manchester City Airport for the WE'RE BUZZIN Festival. It is the first festival of its kind, and the theme this year is Indie versus Old School. And it will be featuring some of the best cover bands and old school bands our country has been privy to over the last 30 years. Getting proceedings underway will be the K-Klass gang, and I am so pleased to say that I am joined on the Stage and Screen Show by Paul Roberts from the K-Klass. And Paul, I'm starting all my interviews off at the moment asking people about the COVID, the lockdown. How was it for you guys? Did you manage to keep working?
Well, no, basically we stopped for 18 months. I think we managed a couple of socially distanced gigs within that time, which were like a blessed relief. But I mean, it was really crazy at the start of it on lockdown one. I think by the time we were 3 weeks in, me and Russ and Bobby sort of sat down together and well, not sat down together, sat down apart from each other via, sort of Skype and stuff like that, and realised that it was the first time since 1996 that we'd gone longer than 3 weeks without a gig. It was a real shock to the system. In some ways, it was good because we had time to sit down and write some new music and, really almost sort of fall in love with music again. So I had a lot more time on our hands to do live streams and stuff like that. And the rest was okay as well. I invested the time in getting myself fit and healthy and, realised how burnt out we all were as well, when that started. And that's something I've kept up to this day. But it felt so good to be back in front of proper crowds at the end of it. It really did.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a festival coming up in a couple of weeks. Well, next week actually, on the 17th of September. We'll talk about that in a moment, if that's all right. But you must have feared that anything like, I mean, it was a very real fear that anything like a festival was gone. It was something that would never come back.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I followed it all so closely because obviously I was very invested in it with work, and I ended up almost like a virologist expert. I was sort of following all sort of top virologists and doctors and people like that on Facebook, and for a time before they knew that the vaccines would work and stuff like that, it was looking dodgy for us. Do you know what I mean? It's like, could this be a forgotten industry? I think I was all right until I think about the start of 2021, January. I sort of coped with it all quite well, and then the start of January 2021, before the sort of full vaccine rollouts and before they realised that it was going to work and make a difference, I was thinking, there was talk of us not working again for the whole of that year, and around about that time, so I really did start struggling with it all, kind of thing. But then, within a couple of weeks of that, the news came through that it was really working, and there was a roadmap back to where we could get back to some kind of normality. So, and when we did, it was absolutely fantastic. The crowd, still to this day now, people are so glad to be out. The energy and stuff like that from crowds and stuff like that is definitely more than it was before the whole thing happened. I think people are really, really grateful. You look at all the big festivals this year, and they're all, the energy level and everything is up sort of 20% from where it had been previously. There's been some fantastic events.
Well, I think that people missed it far more than they ever thought they would have done before lockdown. When it came back, it was almost it was really emotional, I think, for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. Us included, and we managed to do just before lockdown sort of ended. We managed to do a socially distanced party just for some of our, for about 100 of our friends, at a venue very local to where I live. It was just done by sort of word of mouth on the internet and stuff like that, and sort of invite our friends and stuff like that. But even though it was socially distanced, it was the first time everybody could get back together again and listen to music again together. And that was, that was a really emotional night. It was just so good.
Yeah.
See people with smiles on the face and appreciating music again, even be it in the sort of situation it was in. And like I say, then, it was when it had been delayed a month, the sort of restart. Then when it did restart a month later, like I said, it was like somebody had chucked sort of petrol on a barbecue. The whole place just went up.
Yeah.
People, I think the indoor events, people were still a little bit hesitant going back to them at first, but, the festivals certainly, were absolutely fantastic. And there was always the fear as well that a lot of the sort of 90s ravers and the people from that generation, that we might lose them in that time, and that they'd get used to not going out anymore, and we'd never see half of those people again, they'd be too used to staying in and chilling and stuff. But, it's quite the opposite, really. People realised how much they loved the scene. And it's weird, the lockdown live streams that we did almost brought more people back to the table, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of them had sort of lost their confidence in going out, but then started engaging in these live streams at home and interacting and forming friend groups and stuff like that. Via these live streams and stuff like that. And there's a number of successful events now that literally started in lockdown via sort of live stream social networks and social groups that have gone on to be really big scale events and stuff like that. So, I always like to look for the positive in everything, and there was even positives in that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we all have to sort of think outside the box. So we're all a little bit more computer savvy, that's for sure. One of the things that I always love when I do a little bit of research before I do an interview is when I stumble across, like with you guys, K-Klass. We're a Wrexham-based radio station. Now, you're from Chester. Half of K-Klass is from Wrexham. Anybody that follows the football knows that that's a collaboration that doesn't normally mix well. How did it mix well for you guys?
It's absolutely bizarre, because I'm a lifelong Chester fan. I still go to this day whenever I can. My son, my dad was before me. My son now goes home and away with them every single week, even at the pathetic level that they exist at the moment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're our team and we stick with them. Carl and Andy, who obviously are no longer part K-Klass, haven't really been, they've gone and done other things since 2007. Me and Russ were always very much Chester. And, Carl especially was a Wrexham fan that, used to go all the time. And, I won't lie to you, when we first, the whole thing started in sort of like, the second summer of love, 1988, when the big house music explosion happened, and everybody put all the differences aside and just started getting on with each other for the love of music and for the love of clubbing. And, our relationship with Carl and Andy was very much born of that, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There were a few people within both towns, town and city at the time, that weren't keen on us working together and made their views quite clear to us as well. But, we sort of rose above all of that, and, music was more important than petty football rivalries. So,
yeah.
And that's where we ended to this day. We were based in Wrexham for a long, long time, and I like the place, do you know what I mean? It was gutted this year, it didn't get City of Culture. Everybody was rooting for them. There's a lot of talent come from the area over the years. A lot of house music talent come from the area over the years, and it deserved it, to be honest.
And on that subject, when most kids, they either want to be a footballer or work in the music industry. You ended up working in the music industry. Was that always the dream as a kid?
Not really. I always used to like going to watch bands and stuff like that. It never really occurred to me that I wanted to be in a band until house music came along. I started working for some indie bands, just sort of like traditional guitar setup bands. And through that, stumbled across some of the early club nights, the Acid House explosion in 1988.
Yeah.
I was always into New Order, which was always a bit more electronic, so I had a little bit of an interest in synthesizers and drum machines and stuff like that. I got made redundant from British Telecom, which was my only real job before doing this. And I spent the redundancy money buying a drum machine and a keyboard. That sort of coincided with starting going to the Hacienda and stuff like that, and listening to the music there and being blown away by it, and thinking, I should make this music myself. It can't be that complicated. we didn't, myself and Russ got together, we didn't have very much sort of proper equipment. And then Calon and Andy, the two lads from Wrexham, were already had like a dance music band called Interstate up and running. They had like a, I don't know, they were sort of get a bit technical, but they had a Roland 909 drum machine, which was the one that was actually used on all the records. And the second we heard that, it was like, great, now we've got this.
Yeah.
We can actually forge on and make some of this music and make it sound the way it should do. And, you know, from there onwards, we never looked back. We did one 4-track EP on Eastern Bloc Records in Manchester called the Wildlife EP, which narrowly missed charting. And then the next release we had, once we'd remixed it a couple of years later, was Rhythm is a Mystery, and that went to number 3 in the national charts. And all of a sudden, you know, we were propelled from being a van driver, a lab technician, a postman, and a British Telecom employee to being on top of the pops.
Which is, yeah, I mean, that's just incredible. Let me just ask you about the Hacienda, because you just mentioned it briefly there. I mean, the Hacienda famously was, it's quite notorious for a whole generation of people. Anybody that was anyone has played there. Can you explain to anybody that wasn't around then what it was about the Hacienda that made it such an amazing place to go?
It was just, I mean, at the time, the building was fantastic anyway. I mean, before the Acid House explosion in 1988, you know, it ran at a loss for years and years and years. It was a fantastic building. It was based on sort of like, you know, the big clubs in New York at the time, you know, like what's in Paradise Garage and stuff like that, Dance Period. Lots of the big New York. And it was way ahead of its time. It was too advanced for the city at the time. But then when the dance music explosion happened, it all came together, and that building was just perfect for it. It was the perfect space for it. It was like, no, I mean, you know, back in those days, nightclubs that you'd go to in Chester and Wrexham, God forbid if you were unlucky enough to do that at the time, were just horrible, sort of chrome-plated, mirror-laden, pastel-coloured hellholes that played nasty music, and people just used to go there, have a late drink and get off with girls. It was very little to do with dancing or the music or anything like that. You know, the Hacienda was just, you know, when you went there to that environment and it was all just about the music and nothing else, it was like a breath of fresh air. It really was. And again, you know, it was a nightclub where you'd go and all of a sudden you wouldn't see trouble or fighting outside there at the end of the night. Everybody would be getting on with each other, no matter where they came from, whether they were gay, straight, black, white, whatever football team they supported. Nobody cared. Everyone was equal. You were rich, you were poor, you were a student, you were ever. If you were in there, you were in there for the music. And it was just an incredible place. And over those few summer, you know, over the summer of 88, 89, 90, the atmosphere in there just continued to get more and more crazy and more intense. And then, you know, obviously it's well documented. Unfortunately, eventually the gangs came in and took over the drugs scene in there, and it all ended sort of badly, really. Yeah. But you know, the Hacienda, to me, is when it's shut, has left a void in Manchester that's never been filled.
And you've named, I've heard you name Graham Park as one of your biggest inspirations at the time. And Graham he used to have a show actually on our radio station on Calon FM, and he's still a big advocate for our radio station. And now you, having been a big fan of his, of worked with him, that must be really weird.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Graham, you know, no qualms admitting it. Graham and Mike Pickering as well were like massive influences. So I have no qualms admitting that, you know, I was like this starry-eyed kid that used to stand dancing on the front of the stage at the Hacienda, gazing up at the DJ box at Graham Park and Mike Pickering, you know, sort of idolising them and what they did. And you know, they were a big influence on the K-Klass sound. It was weird, though, because, you know, over the years, K-Klass, you know, ended up actually playing live at the Hacienda more. Well, I think we were equal with the Happy Mondays in terms of number. We actually ended up playing at the Hacienda more times than New Order. Wow. Over the year, in the short few years that we actually got to play there. Yeah. You know, we were there that regularly as a live act. You know, we're sort of almost part of the fabric of the story now as well.
And you mentioned briefly, you went basically from the club scene rather quickly into, for want of a better word, the mainstream of music. And I wondered if to do that you have to literally stand out in the crowd. And I wondered what it was that you think it was that set you apart.
I mean, we weren't pop stars, we weren't divas. You look at any of the videos, you look at any of the press interviews we did, the photos we did back at the time. We didn't try to be anything that we weren't. We just sort of portrayed ourselves as ourselves. We'd go on stage, we wouldn't have dancers flouncing around, or anything like that. We didn't have MCs screaming and shouting over our sets or over our set. It was just us making the music and Bobby doing lead vocals, and it was very much what you see is what you get, and we let the music do the talking. And we always tried to conduct ourselves that way, and I think in the long run it's paid off. There's a lot of other acts at the time that haven't carried on doing what we're doing, and the fact that we've always continued to love what we do. We've always stayed current with the music. We're busier now than we've ever been. We've stayed right up to date with what happens all the time because we love house music still to this day. And there's some great young producers now that are making fantastic music within the genre and beyond. And, it's stayed fresh. Like I said, at the start of lockdown, the longest we'd gone without a DJ gig since 1996 was 3 weeks. Whereas a lot of people have gone away from the scene for a few years and gone to do other jobs and then drifted back into it when times have got good and the money and the old school house scene sort of revived. Whereas we've stuck with it sort of rigorously right the way through, stayed up to date with all the the new digital technology, the new ways of doing things. We've just stuck at it right the way through, and I think now it pays off because we are so busy now.
And I've spoken to a few excuse me, a few bands, and it doesn't really matter what generation they were from. They always remember their time going on Top of the Pops. Do you remember your first time? How many times did you do Top of the Pops?
Did it twice with K-Klass. As did Bobby, and then myself and Andy from K-Klass did it once with Candy Stanton. And Bobby went on also to perform on Top of the Pops with a Manchester band called Calon, who were really successful at the time.
Must be a real thrill to get that call that you're going on Top of the Pops at the time.
Yeah, I mean, of course, for our generation, it was a massive thing. You always used to watch Top of the Pops religiously, and there was a lot of so-called alternative underground bands and stuff like that. So no, I'll never do Top of the Pops. We're too underground for that. We never took that approach. Do you know what I mean? A lot of our peers and a lot of the bands we looked up to performed on there, and we were like, well, we've got absolutely no qualms about doing it. We want to expose our music to as many people as possible. Again, when we did Top of the Pops, so we didn't sort of jump around like lunatics and act it up and try and pretend to be anything we weren't. We just came on and performed our music. Yeah. And again, looking back at, Top of the Pops repeats obviously on BBC on a Friday night on BBC4 a lot at the moment, and we've looked back at we've actually for the first time we've seen back our performances from back in the day, and I think thankfully they've dated really well, whereas some of them at the time, some of the other bands from our genre at the time, you look back at their performances and they might just look a little bit cringeworthy.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, it's been lovely speaking to you, Paul. Thanks ever so much for this. But you're going to be playing the WE'RE BUZZIN Festival. It's a brand new festival taking place at the Manchester City Airport on the 17th of September. That's next Saturday. I'm wondering, is playing a festival, is it much different to playing a normal show, for want of a better word?
Yeah, absolutely. Festival crowd is definitely different. You know what I mean? It's more based around sort of just playing really big hits that people know, and people can have a bit of sort of audience participation, get involved, maybe a couple of sing-along tracks that they all know, kind of thing. And they're really enjoyable to do. We've had a really good festival season. I think Buzzin Festival is probably going to be one of our last festivals of the year. I think probably only got one or two after that. The festival season started for us in the middle of May this year, so we've had a really good run at it. Yeah. We've done more outdoor events than we've ever done this summer, and I absolutely love them. Do you know what I mean? Now I'm getting a bit older, it's nice that most of them finish at a reasonable hour. After you can go, you can have a brilliant day out, do you know what I mean? Yeah. You can go and get involved and indulge and have a few drinks and have a fantastic day and, party and dance all day, but then you're back and you're sorted in time to still sort of save your day and do something the next day as well, which is nice. But the whole festival market, the whole festival industry in this country has become massive, and there's a good reason why, because people go around and have the time of their lives.
Paul, it's been a treat to speak to you, my friend. Thanks ever so much for that. I really appreciate it.
No, it's been a pleasure speaking to you too.
Thanks, mate. You take care of yourself. All the best.
All the best. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. That's Paul Roberts from K-Klass, who will be performing at the WE'RE BUZZIN Festival next Saturday, the 17th of September. And coming up in the third and final hour, we have got Phats Small frontman Ben Ofedu, who will also be playing at the WE'RE BUZZIN Festival. It's all going on today.
Give me the ting, give me the ting, give me the
It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show.